Shlomo, amechu ilan debasu koyumo bu parlamento de Europa. Kamuseina kito guboy hase lu parlamento. Hatu khud barnoshe kit khuzit qud mahtito u qolatkhu. وهاسي يبعو سيدي أديوما مشتوتفوا بقبوي مشمعوا قوليخو إلو أشور الخيو علي ديمقراطي علي حيروثو ددخو خد فرصوفه بس إيلان استخد عامو ينقد محتوتو وقولتخو ما حيتو لي علي نمرة دنشتو بليستادي سوسيال ديمقراطر تودي ساقي
هاثي وزبنت حوبو تليه تسمو إلى نيشا تتشافع ومكشروي لأنه هاوي لزمومو ببريثة كولا حوبو تليه أتشاتو قدوه محمش حصر واشتحصر بو يرحو دنشتو قدوه بو وهدو عتيقود أصيريسكا تكتيو إشمي بوشتا إي بيب سودر تليه نطرينا كولي خود أوثيتو لتري يوماني قدوه غلبة ميدون حفيتوثي باسيمة إباية قدوه زاموري غلبة قدوه نيني بعد لحدو عزيز صليبة بشار يوحانون سرغون غورو آرام قرياقوس ألبرت ويليام باسكال نغم أدوار موسى إيلونا دنحو صبروا تلطع عينونو شيء إذا طعينو سك طلبنا شبقونو قدوي غلبة ميدوني باسي مكتوي حفيتوثو مي حضرة دنو شحر نستي خد سربوية وارمنوي مشتود في عمينا قدوي بشرورو فستيفال اشمي حوبو تليه يعني سودو تليه تكتيو حوبو كلوزم دويو حوبو توخو عمينا ما فيتينا تري ومتفيشي مو عمره حمشحصر واشتحصر بو يرحو دنشتو دأتشاتو نطرينا نخو حمشحصر واشتحصر بو يرحو يوني
Hello, my name is Joseph Pirayou. I want to welcome you to this program. In the beginning, Ashur, as always, this is a live program. Any questions, comments you have would be appreciated. And if you can answer the questions and comments, we can do it live. If not, future programs, you have a question and answers to go through that. For the past couple of weeks, I've been reading from a book called Gods, Graves, and Scholars, the story of archaeology. And it's about the archaeology of civilizations that apparently to the writer is very important. Greek civilization, Egyptian civilization, and Mayan and Aztecs. And the last is the Ashur civilization, or Assyrian, Babylonian, Sumerian, Akkadian. And I guess someday I'll get to this book. What is this? The Assyrians and their neighbors. But before we get to that, we just want to know why there is such a book called Assyrians and Their Neighbors. You know, Dr. Vigram, back in the 1920s, he wrote the book about the history of our people after the fall of Ashur Empire. But up until 1800s, there was nothing as far as the world, especially in Europe, to say, well, you know, there is that Assyria or Ashur or whatever. It's pronounced that they would write books. There was a lot of information about Egypt, Egyptologists, Egypt this, you know, the pyramids, Cleopatra, Salahuddin, you know, all of these Egyptian, you know, history movies. Then, you know, as I mentioned, Bota, the first person I mentioned about in this book, he found Nineveh. Then there is this guy, Grothenfeld, and he's not the only one that deciphered the cuneiform language that they found, you know, it's like that birds walking on mud as is described. But people have dedicated their life, the time that they have, over things that maybe for us now, since we have the information, back then they didn't have the information. So it was so valuable. So after Boto and Grotefend, we get to this guy named Rawlinson. And the book that I have here, it has titled Rawlinson, Nebuchadnezzar's Dictionary in Clay. And he's one of the people that Grotefend, he deciphered, like opened the door, how to decipher that language. But it was Rawlinson that I don't want to say improved, but he actually translated certain things that the specific one I will be talking about here. But first about Grotefeld. So, about Rawlinson. Rawlinson, he was born in 1810. And he entered the military. Do we have a photo of this guy? Entered the military. Oh, another thing, I'm sorry about, I'm going like this. My normal eyeglasses, they broke, some door hit me in the head and the handle came off. They call it bow. And didn't have time to fix it. So I got these from Costco and they're not exactly so I have to kind of read. I have my flashlight here to make sure I'm, reading the right information here. Anyway, born in 1810, Rawlinson entered the military service of the East India Company in 1826, and by 1833 employed as political agent in Kandahar, Afghanistan. By 1843, he had become British consul in Baghdad, and by 1851, consul general with the military rank of lieutenant colonel. In 1856, he returned to England, was elected to Parliament, and in the same year appointed to the board of the East India Company. In 1859, he became British minister to the Persian court at Tehran. The way they write it is Tehran. From 1865 to 68, he was again a member of the parliament. One thing I just noticed here is that it talks about East India Company. Those of you who have seen the James Bond movies, that's the company that has all the spies coming through it, the East India Company. Well, that's another story. So why this person, what's his name? C.W. Seram or Karam wrote about Rawlinson. So there is that place, is in western part of Iran. We have a map of Iran. Let's show that so people have an idea what we're talking about. So see those red dots, one of them is Tehran, the other one is Baghdad, and Behistun, now it's called modern Bisitun. There's a city called Kermanshah. That's where the Behistun rock is that I will be talking about, and that's what Rawlinson is pretty much famous for. So this is the general area that we're talking about. And if you remember, in the map where it says Iran, that's where the Persepolis monument was. And in the North Iraq, that's where the Nineveh is. That's the connection that we had between Bota, Grotefend. Now, between these two areas, we have Behistun rock. And I'm just going to read from the book about the information that they have. So we're going to see some photos of this place. This guy is writing here, since time immemorial, a steep, double-peaked, cliffy mountain has dominated the land of Bagistana, landscape of the gods, and the ancient road passing by its foot from Hamadan to Babylon by way of Kermanshah. Here, about 2,500 years ago, Darius, king of the Persian, Darayavush, Dorajavush, Dara, Darav, Darius are variations of his name in different languages. In Farsi, we call him Dariush. Had reliefs and inscriptions carved in the cliff face in celebration of his own person, deeds, and victories. This memorial stands some 160 feet above the valley floor. On a great beam of stone are carved large figures that stand out boldly from the cliff. Here, poised in the glittering air, the great Darius is shown leaning on his bow, his right foot placed on the prostrate Gaumata, the magician who had incited the kingdom to rebellion. Behind the king stand two Persian nobles with bows, quivers, and lances before him, their feet bound, ropes at their necks covered the 9 kings of lies. That's what they are translated into. Now brought to heel. At the sides and beneath his mountain are 14 columns of writing, recording in 3 different languages the accomplishments of Darius. Grotefeld, the guy that I talked about last program, had recognized the bare fact that there are 3 variations of cuneiform script, as you can see in this photo. 14 columns of writings. Like, this is a massive project that they have put together to go to that 160 feet above the ground on a mountain, just inscribed, and is still in existence today. They did a great job of preserving it. So Grotefeld had recognized the bare fact that there were 3 variations of cuneiform script at Behistun, but of course lacked the means to identify them for what they were. One was Old Persian language, the other one Elamite, and the last one Babylonian. Among the records that Darius caused to be chiseled in the solid rock for the edification of posterity was an announcement that ran as follows. King Darius gives notice, thus, you who in future days will see this inscription by order, writ with hammer upon the cliff, who will see these human figures here. Efface, destroy nothing. Take care so long as you have seed, to leave them undisturbed. And undisturbed they did leave them. And there is a famous story about Rawlinson, is that in the beginning of this chapter, it writes that in 1837, Major Henry Rawlinson, then in the employ of the Persian War Ministry, was lowered with the help of block and tackled down the face of a high cliff near Behistun. His purpose was to copy some inscriptions hewn into the rock. He's the second diplomat to combine Assyriology with professional, political, and worldly interests. He's the second diplomat to combine Assyriology with professional, political, and worldly interests. Is that interesting? I don't know if you have any photos of that. We don't have any photos, but there are drawings that shows he's hanging from the cliff. Anyway, it says, dangling from the rope secured above, Rawlinson copied down the old Persian version of the writing. It was only some years later that he tackled the Babylonian version, an operation that required enormous ladders, long cables, and hooks, equipment that were hard to come by in the Middle East. Despite these difficulties, in 1846, he laid the first exact copy of the famous inscription before the Royal Asiatic Society, and a complete translation with it. It was the first great British triumph of Assyriological decipherment. Before I go further, let me put the flyer on. When you write Assyriology, it is not Assyria, it's like Assyrio, then logy. So there is an O and I. I switched it. I put Assyrialogy. So don't take it that we can't spell or we don't know what's going on, but I did that kind of on purpose. But anyway, Assyriology. So he sends these to the Royal Asiatic Society, and there are a couple other people that they were involved in deciphering these things. But what made Rawlinson famous is that he went over there, he just copied from actual, when you're hanging, when you see the photos here of the actual rock and the inscription on it, now they have provided paths that you can access very easily how to get to them. But back then, 1846, it wasn't that easy to get to that. So he copied, and there were like three classes of, since there were like three different writings, Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian. So different people that he's mentioning here. So Grotefeld was concentrated class 1. I think that's the Old Persian, if I'm not mistaken. Then the class 2, there is that Danish person named Neil Vestergaard. Then class 3 is done by Rawlinson, and there are a couple other people. So I'm not going to go through this whole thing that they're writing. But the part is that when they talk about the class 3, I think it's the Babylonian, says the class 3 group of characters for the name of the famous king Nebuchadnezzar or Nebuchadrezzar, put it in parentheses, it pronounced according to the discrete phonetic values, if pronounced according to the discrete phonetic values, would be Anpasadusis. But in actual fact, the name was pronounced Nebuchadnezzar, or as we say in our language, Nukhadnezzar. But how do you know what the phonetic is? See, you have this writing. First of all, we call it sissa, like a bird walking on, mud or wet clay. How do you find out the letters? But the letters that you find out, are you comparing to English? Because English, we don't have khe, right? One of the typical, Mediterranean or Middle Eastern sounds is khe. I mean, Russian, they have that too. How do you know in that language that you're finding these letters? Because it writes here Nebuchadnezzar, but we say Nukhadnezzar. We have a khe in there. So I was like amazed. How does a French, English, German that they speak? I guess German they have khe too. There's like a connection between their language and the Middle East, but that's another story. How do you know? It says the phonetic, if pronounced according to the discrete phonetic values, his name, Nebuchadnezzar's name, would be Anpasadusis. How do you get Nebuchadnezzar or Nukhadnezzar from Andapadusis? That's the amazing part, that how these people, a friend of mine was telling me about the name Ashurbanipal. In reality, the name is something else. I don't remember exactly how he pronounced it. He's a Assyriologist and he can read the cuneiform. But the point of this material that I'm going through is that there was people that put effort to find out about this civilization. So it says, about this time went to the uninformed model seemed complete at Koyunjik, where Bota had excavated nearly 100 clay tablets were found in rapid succession. So there's like groups are planning and trying to just decipher, translate, to see what's going on with these people. There's that rock here in Behistun, there is the findings in Nineveh, and they all seem to be a cuneiform writing, maybe different languages, but same alphabet, like Arabic and Farsi. We have same alphabet, but it's a different language and not too much different. Anyway, it says these tablets later identified as dating back to around the middle of the 7th century BC might have been deliberately designed as aids to the scholars of posterity, for they contained long listings in which the different phonetic values and meanings of the ideogrammatic script were correlated with those of the alphabetical script. So according to this guy, when my ancestors, these ancestors of the Persians, Ashuri, when they put these together, they had the key with it, so when people translated or they tried to decipher it, they would know the phonetic. Phonetic is the voice, al-labid or A, B, C. So it's amazing that they understand what had happened with the clays that they left for them. Anyway, this was a tremendously important find. The cryptologists now had dictionaries to work with. The comparative listings had evidently served the beginner studying cuneiform writing at a time when the older pictographic and syllabary scripts were becoming simplified into an alphabetic version. So as time went by, they got like a dictionary, just make it easy for these people to read or language. So Rawlinson releases some information to the public. Then this place, it's called the Asiatic. I mentioned that the Royal Asiatic Society in London, they did something seldom or never heard of in the history of scholarship. So there are four great cuneiform experts. So to the four great cuneiform experts of the day, unknown to each of the other, the society sent a sealed envelope containing a newly discovered lengthy Assyrian inscription, with a note urgently requesting its decipherment. So there are these four experts that society sends them the tablets without letting each other know who's doing what. So each one of them is doing it independently, deciphering something that is exactly the same. So the four experts, Rawlinson, Talbot, Hinks, and Oppert. So they come together, all went to work on the project about the same time, not knowing about the others, and each working according to his private methods. Finally, all four returned the results in sealed envelopes, whereupon a commission examined the text. The claims that had been so vociferously scoffed at by the public were brilliantly vindicated. It was definitely possible to read this supremely complicated syllabic writing, for all four texts agreed on essential points. Many Assyriologists undoubtedly resented this extraordinary experiment and felt they had been grossly duped. Such a method of checking they felt was beneath science, however much the laity might approve. No matter, in 1857 in London appeared an inscription by Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, translated by Rawlinson, Talbot, Hinks, and Oppert. There could not have been a more convincing proof of the scientific accuracy of the results, even though a diversity of approaches over paths heavily strewn where obstacles had been used. Assyriology continued to develop apace. 10 years later, the first elementary grammar of the Assyrian language appeared. 10 years later is like 1867, like 100 years before I was born. The first elementary grammar of the Assyrian language appeared. Presently, scholars undertook to unravel the mysteries of the spoken tongue. Today, countless students are able to read cuneiform writing. Imperfectly inscribed or incomplete tablets pose the only difficulties. And of course, material defects can be expected after 3,000 years of wind and rain and sun beating on the ancient clay. So this is the part that he writes about the Rawlinson, but they spend their time over what? Why? I was thinking about the interest that these people had into finding out, into deciphering something new. As you remember, if you've seen the past few programs, in this book mentions that after Bota found Nineveh, and by finding Nineveh, he didn't excavate the whole area. He just found the location. After that, Austin Layard comes and he opens it up and he discovers everything, the palaces and everything associated with that. But when Botha finds that, it says either Europe or France was on fire. Why should it be on fire? What does that mean, on fire? For, I don't know, men, ever since men or women, of course, could think, it was like, who am I? Why am I here? And now that I'm here, what am I supposed to do with this life? And why do I have to die? It's a subject that nobody likes to talk about. It's just, it puts me down, it depresses me. And I'll try not to talk about the subject too much or bring it up. I know it's depressing, but ever since time, immortal, there are like poets write about these things. People that think there are some people, they don't care. They're just born, they want to work, they want to eat, drink, sex, this, that, and that's their life. Well, there are people that they think about these things. They, why am I here? Was there an evolution? Was there a creation? If there is evolution, it's just go through this life because we don't matter. Each individual doesn't matter. If it's creation, well, there is that, what they call it, intelligent design that doesn't specifically relate to any specific, maybe religion, but there's intelligent design that he designed us as our creator. Then we come to like these religions, Jewish, Christian, and Islam, that they believe in an actual creator that relates to us, Adam and Eve, the story everybody of these three religions believe in that. Then they go different paths when it comes to, certain things of belief. But another thing is that, our name, Ashur, which means creator. Ashur, the one who started it, the beginner, the creator. So our people are named after the creator. I guess they believed in a creator. They believed in a purpose of their life. That's why I'm guessing they left all of these. Of course, what we see here is Persian, but what Botha found, what their layer find, what the Rawlinson did with the Babylonian texts, they find out that these people back then, the intellect that they had, the way that they lived their life, there was a value. There were things that they wanted to leave behind for people to see, to learn. This book mentions before the findings of Botha, before the findings of Nineveh and all this surrounding area, they used to think that Egypt was the cradle of civilization. Now, everybody knows that Ashur, or Mesopotamia, they like to call that. But there is no Sumer, Akkad, Babel. There is only Ashur people left. And that's Ashur is the cradle of civilization. Okay, great. Then what? What do we get out of it? What is the purpose? What is the point, right? We are left with more questions than answers. Back then, they didn't have the technology that we have. The tablets that they had back then is the tablets that they decipher, or we know who the kings are. Today's tablets, they take our time. Like these gadgets that we have, they waste our time more than ever. We spend it on Facebook. You can watch this program on Facebook. Don't worry about that. That's not a waste of time. But generally speaking, we play games. We play so many things that they distract us from learning. A lot of people have sent me private messages that we didn't know about this stuff. I didn't know either. That's why I'm sharing it with you. It's great stuff. It's like you learn so much. But the part that I was mentioning, and I told myself I will not go through that too deep, there were a couple of things. Why do I have to die? Because we have so much time on earth. And what we do with that time? What do we accomplish? Why do we accomplish it? How did it? A couple of days ago, I attended a funeral of, I'm sure most of you will know it, Robert Betsayad. If you can share that photo. Shamira Media did a great job live streaming it. And I think if you have Facebook, there are like 2 parts. And I know Robert from way back. We were not close friends or anything, but we knew each other because back when he used to sing in the parties and I was young and my legs were like, Ferrari, just dancing like for hours without stop. He would make special requests for us. Then after that, we would talk and he would tell us, you guys doing a great job. Keep up dancing. That's our culture. And later, his younger brother, Edward, not later, but I know his younger brother, Edward, we were friends. Then now through marriage, we are related. First of all, I didn't know much about his history as a patriotic person. I knew he was a singer. He had great voice, beautiful songs. We danced. He passed away, age 72, which is relatively young nowadays. Why am I bringing the subject? Because after the funeral, we went to the hall for the giving the condolences. One of his grandsons, he came and he sang a song, one of his songs, Nanny Nanny. It's like song singing to the grandmother about the motherland, about home. It's a patriotic song, and one of the songs that I think is most famous for is Robert is famous for is that song, and he has other songs, of course. But when I saw the grandson singing, it says, Robert, you're gone. You know, as short a time as it was, but what we leave behind. His grandson is singing. I don't know what he will do in the future, but he knows the song. He knows his grandfather, what he did. And when you look at our lives, the value that we put in the time that we have, what we spend it on. This program is dedicated to our identity. If nothing else, that's the point that I want to make sure we preserve our identity, Ashur, our language, the traditions that we have. But the nationality, the identity, because that's what the enemy is after. If anything that is going to be remembered about me when my time, Joseph wanted to keep our identity. So this, I mentioned about why do I have to die? I'm not going to get into the religious theology part of that, but what we do between now and then. So that was a part when I saw the grandson, I was like, I wanted to share that with you. He's gone. Robert is gone. May he rest in peace. His grandson continue. And as we do the things, we teach our kids, our grandkids to continue until the time comes when other things will be fulfilled. We get our land back, but that's another story. The second part I was going to share with you is that it's Assyriology. Assyriology was, I don't want to say invented, but they started like around early 1800, 1820, 1825, and is related to the art, culture, anything related to history, archaeology of the people, but it's called Assyriology. I was looking, maybe you guys know more than I do. I didn't find any Kurdiology. I didn't find any Arabiology. I didn't find any Turkeyology. I didn't find any Persianology, Jewishology, Babyloniology, Syriacology, Arameanology, Chaldeanology, Nology. Only Assyriology. The only thing is that I wish we would say Ashuriology, but it's still okay. That's the only one I know. I know we have Egyptology. Why am I saying this? The value that these people put to get the information that our ancestors inscribed on the clay to pass it to us. All I can say is that my duty is to preserve that. And by the work of non-Ashuris, we have this information. There's a non-Ashuri that wrote the history, the Assyrians and their names, which I will share with you sometime before, I don't know, the end of the century. But this is it. This is us. This is our history. This is who we are, preserved. Robert's grandson is going to preserve the song, to preserve the history, grandma looking for the motherland. And that's how I believe every one of us should look at each other, brothers and sisters, to preserve our identity. Talking about preserving our identity, we come to the end of the program. As always, thank you for watching. Blessed be Ashur, the work of Creator's hand. Amin and Mabqila. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
شيخاني